It's your Friday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand. Happy to be back for another day, final show of the week, and a good one at that. Chris Hine from the Tribune joins me here in a few minutes. Talk Timberwolves off of their big win on Wednesday against Denver, previously undefeated defending champion Denver. Wolves won that game fairly handily, 110-89. Even their record at 2-2 maybe quieted some of the rustling going around with fans, like, hey, what's going on here? You know, kind of more of the same from this team from last year to this year. And it probably give themselves some confidence as well going forward. Now, some big games coming up still for the Wolves. They have an off day today, but Utah on Saturday, and then I think Boston on Monday and New Orleans on Wednesday, all of those at Target Center. So opportunity for them to have a nice homestand, but also, you know, those are all teams that will challenge them in different ways. Can they rise to the challenge? Chris and I will talk more about that in just a little while. Got to get to some Joshua Dobbs stuff at the end of the show. New Vikings quarterback spoke with the media for the first time, the Minnesota media for the first time on Thursday. Had some interesting thoughts from him on kind of getting ready on short notice that I want to share with you here in a little bit. First, though, what did I miss? We're going to have to start with the Wild. Be nice for them if they would start better in these games. They lost again on Thursday, 5-3 to New Jersey. Second straight loss to New Jersey. Fourth straight loss overall. And it's not one thing, and that's the problem. That's what I want to talk about here. It's not just one thing that's going poorly for them. And so I want to kind of identify all of the areas in which they are coming up short and maybe try to figure out, okay, how do you fix something when it's everything, more or less, that's going wrong? And not everything, but a lot of different areas going wrong. I think the first place you look naturally when a team is giving up so many goals in every game is the goaltending, and the goaltending has not been good. Let's start right there. Filip Gustavsson got the start again on Thursday, and again was not great. He was great in the opener of the season, a 41-save shutout. Ever since then, 27 goals allowed in his last 5 games. Now, sometimes you look at it and you say, okay, is it really just the goalie who is to blame when games go bad? No, but I think this data will show that it's him and it's the Wild's defense that is letting them down. So let's take a look at this. Gustavsson has given up 27 goals in 6 games, about 4.5 goals per game. Unacceptable at any level. You're not going to win a lot of games that way. His expected goals allowed are around 3.66 goals allowed per game. So he's giving up almost a goal more per game than he would be expected to be giving up given the quality of shots, where the shots are coming from, game flow, things like that. So he's giving up more this year, about 5 total goals more than he should be, given basically what an average goalie would do, or what would it be expected of him based on the shot quality. Last season, he gave up 2.1 goals per game over the course of 39 games, 2.1 goals. He's giving up more than twice as many goals as he was a year ago. That is definitely not something that you want to hear if you're Gustafsson, if you're a Wild fan, if you're anybody. His expected goals allowed last year were 2.65. So he was overachieving last year relative to expectations by about half a goal a game. So what you have is underachieving this year, overachieving last year. But if you look at that, the expected goals are about a goal higher this year, almost exactly a goal higher this year, 3.66 versus 2.65 in the games that he is playing. So clearly, defensively, the Wild are doing him more favors. They're not playing well in front of him, and he is not playing well behind him. And that is a recipe for disaster, as is a penalty kill that has given up 12 goals already this season. Wild getting outscored, I think 14-8 on special teams. They've scored 2 shorthanded goals. They've given up 2 shorthanded goals, scored 6 power play goals, and given up 12 goals on the opposing power play. So 14-8 on special teams, especially looking at those 12 power play goals allowed. You cannot give up 12 power play goals, especially when you are only scoring 6 yourself. That's just too big of a difference too much of a gap on special teams, and that was a huge part of the reason they lost to New Jersey on Thursday. The 5-on-5 play, they were pretty good. They especially as the game wore on, they were skating well. They were a good team in 5-on-5. But you know what? A lot of the game is not played 5-on-5. Those are the moments that have sunk them in the playoffs, and those moments are sinking them so far this season. So you look at defense, special teams, goaltending, that's a lot. And the first line has been underproducing. It's been not playing well enough for the Wild's liking. They've split up that line. It bore some fruit on Thursday. It looked like, the Kirill Kaprizov, Ryan Hartman, and Matt Zuccarello started playing better once they were apart. Kaprizov had a goal last night. He's got 3 goals and 7 assists in 10 games, so a point per game, but he doesn't look like the player that we are used to seeing so far this season through 10 games. It was weird. I'm reminded of the shootout they had the other night where they lost, I believe, to the Capitals. His attempt in the shootout looked so casual, so nonchalant, and he missed. Everybody missed in that shootout. I think all 7 Wild shooters missed in that shootout, but it just didn't look like his body language. It didn't look like he was in it, and that was bothersome to me. It's not the energy I'm used to seeing from Kaprizov. I don't know what it is. I don't know why it is, but the Wild need that line, those players, but especially Kaprizov to get going. So if you're talking about your best player is not playing as well as he could be, your goaltending hasn't been as good as it was last year by a long stretch, your defense is letting you down, and your special teams are letting you down, that is a complete team effort. It's probably why you see on Twitter and social media and comments a lot of fans saying, hey, what about Dean Evison, head coach? What's the long-term plan here? Is he really the guy to lead this team? It's 10 games into the season. I don't think the Wild are in the mood for a coaching change, and we know Bill Guerin has a lot of faith in Dean Evison, but when it is such a wholesale problem like that, when there's so many things going wrong, you do start to look at leadership too. So I will be curious to see where this team heads. I'm sure they've got a lot of soul searching ahead. They've kind of said things to that effect after this losing streak, falling to 3-5-2 on the season. Not looking good at this point in the year. So many things to point to. Will they incrementally improve? Will one or two of those areas start to improve? Will they get kind of wholesale better as the year goes on? Or is this just kind of who they are and they'll have to look for changes elsewhere? I don't know, but it's not pretty on the ice right now. Before we move away from hockey, too, I do want to note Wild had a nice tribute to Adam Johnson, a former local NHL player who died tragically in England in that on-ice incident where his neck was cut by the skate blade. Lots of great tributes pouring in across the NHL, but the greatest tribute might be that we might finally see players wearing protective neck gear to keep them from having these sorts of, freakish but tragic accidents anywhere, but especially in the NHL. You saw TJ Oshie wearing one on Thursday night. This was his quote on being one of the first NHL players to wear a neck guard. He says, "We're grown men. You can make your own choices. I made my choice for my kids. I want to stick around for them. I'm just trying to decrease the chance of injury." Absolutely. Some players don't like to wear them. They say they're uncomfortable. They don't look good. You know what? This isn't just a matter of hey, you're protecting yourself from maybe a broken leg or a separated shoulder. This is life or death. Even if this doesn't happen with alarming frequency, if you can do something, if you can wear a piece of protective equipment that will keep you from having the chance to die on the ice, I think it's something the NHL should look into mandating at some point. England is already doing that for the 24 season after what happened to Adam Johnson. It can't be that far behind in the NHL, especially if they can produce more of these protective neckwear. And I just think it's smart. Why wouldn't you want to protect yourself, especially after we saw what happened in this tragic case?
Grand Casino would like to take a moment and salute the true football fan. The passion, the hope, the anticipation, that incomparable feeling of winning. Grand Casino would also like to take a moment to remind you that you can find all that anticipation, thrill, and winning at Grand Casino. Grand Casino, let your story begin.
Let's bring in Chris Hine, Star Tribune Timberwolves beat writer, to talk a little Wolves in this early part of the season. Chris he's the voice of reason in Twin Cities. Timberwolves media,
Well,
Timberwolves
at least on
Twitter.
this podcast, I'm the voice of reason.
That's very true. I've gone back and deleted all the episodes where I wanted to trade for Ben Simmons. No, I haven't done that, but I did maybe mention that once or twice that would be a good idea. And that, folks, would not have been a good idea. Let me just say that right now. But we were trading texts when I was like, "Hey, can you come on the podcast?" And I was already down on them when they were 1-2, and I was like, "This Denver game feels really big. Like win or lose, kind of feels big." And you were like, like talk to me in a month. It won't feel that big. And I'm like, yeah, you're kind of right. But winning that game did feel kind of important, at least to maybe calm some people down, but also maybe help them feel good about themselves. I mean, they were 1-2 at the start. They had just blown that lead to Atlanta. You got the defending champs undefeated coming in, and you rout them at home.
Yeah, it was a really impressive performance. And I think they got back to what was, working for them early on. And they just played fantastic defense. I thought everybody was clicking on that end of the floor. Carl, I thought, did a commendable job on Jokic, one-on-one straight up. That allowed Rudy to kind of do his thing in the paint and protect the rim, which is also kind of like guarding Jokic in a way, because having somebody at the rim like Rudy Gobert kind of cuts down Jokic's ability to find cutters for easy baskets.
Sure.
So it kind of works in tandem in that way. Jaden McDaniels helping Jamal Murray to get off to an 0-for-9 start at the beginning of the game. I just thought every defensive half-court possession was on point. And it really has been, except for the Atlanta game, I think, 3 of the 4 games so far, the defense has been very good to excellent. And they're number 1 in defensive efficiency right now. It's early and small sample size and all that stuff, but they are number 1 in defensive rating as of this recording. And that's what this team, I think, is ultimately going to be hanging its hat on, is how well it plays defense and the personnel that it has on that end of the floor.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, you're right. They've given up less than 100 points in every game except the Atlanta game. And, Atlanta did just kind of flat out make some shots in that game, and you can't hold a team down every time. Was probably good, really good for them. I wouldn't say probably, but was important for them to hold that halftime lead, because after the Edwards dunk, I didn't see it, by the way, because I have the Bally app and we were not able to watch the game on the Bally app. That was a whole nother story, a whole nother reason for people to get upset on Wednesday night. But I think the Edwards dunk made it 19 at the break, just like Atlanta. And I think even your lead to your game story is like, they could have been thinking, here we go again. But Conley and some other folks really kind of made sure that they were kind of settled down, getting the shots they needed and not going to let that happen again.
And that to me was the difference. The big difference between Monday and Wednesday was Mike Conley, who was going through some food poisoning, did not feel 100% in that Atlanta game, felt 100% Wednesday night. Was able to kind of take charge in the third quarter. Denver tried to make there's a couple points where Denver was making mini runs. And I think they got as close as 14 or 13 or something like that. But each time it seemed like Mike Conley came up with a play, or he got some good offense going, or he hit a floater, or he hit a 3. He had 10 points in that quarter. And then later in the quarter, Kyle Anderson kind of took over as well as the primary ball handler, playmaker. He got a couple buckets, set some people up. Just ran the offense well. And, I think for the Finch doesn't use his timeouts well enough crowd. I think if you go back and look in that third quarter, I think Finch called some timeouts fairly early.
Yes.
In after maybe earlier than he would have in other instances. But he had a quicker trigger on the timeout call, I think. He called 2 in that quarter when Denver made some mini runs. So I think it was a tough night for the Finch doesn't properly use his timeouts crowd.
Or was it a great night because now
was it a great night because now they listen?
He's finally listening
to them.
Finally listening to the crowd.
I always think that's so overrated. This is one of my basketball things. I love our readers. I love our subscribers. I love the people that are passionate enough to want to comment. But the Finch uses his timeouts improperly crowd. Like, come on. Like
Yeah.
basketball is so much more than a coach using his timeouts properly or improperly.
I do think that occasionally it does make a difference. You can kind of reset your guys, and maybe it helped last night. And I don't fall on any kind of spectrum with Finch on that. But I sarcastically tweeted that it was a tough night for the fire Chris Finch crowd, because there was already people who were down on him after 3 games. Like, this guy's got to go. Like, he's the thing that's holding them down. It's like, God, it's been 3 games, 3 out of 82. This
is just what I have come to expect and love about Wolves fans, is that, and in Minnesota sports fans, there is this kind of just pent up frustration that just is unvarnished, and it could be let out at any moment, and it shows how passionate everybody is. And sometimes you just say irrational things when you're angry. We get it. It happens in all facets of life. But yeah, I thought the calling for Finch's firing after game 3 was, I thought, just
it's tremendous.
Give it 10 games, everybody. At least give it 10 games.
Even 10 games, like 3 games is like in terms of like season duration, it's like the equivalent of like being like early in the 3rd quarter of the first NFL game of a season. Like it's just in terms of like how much time has actually elapsed in your season. It was pretty amazing. And I get the frustration. I think part of it too is that the offense hasn't, at least at that point, hadn't looked consistently good. And the offensive efficiency is 22nd, I think you were telling me. Ant and Cat aren't necessarily clicking on that end, either together or sometimes separately. Like, that's still a piece they've got to figure out. They don't have to be a top 5 offense if they're a number 1 defense or a top 5 defense, but they have to be middle of the pack or maybe even a little bit better if they want to be a competitive playoff worthy, like, hey, maybe they can advance a playoff round kind of team.
Yeah, and I think there's room for improvement for each of them. Cat's shooting well below his career averages right now. Ant, I didn't really look up his stats yet, but I know he had the pretty good offensive game in Atlanta, which lifted his numbers a little bit. But I think the big thing for this team is not just offense overall, but it is the late game, crunch time, other teams making a run at us kind of offense that matters the most. Even if they have a really good offense in the other parts of the game, I still think that's a different dynamic that this team is learning how to play through, and what its strengths and weaknesses are in that area. Their weaknesses were on display in Atlanta, where, yes, to Finch's point, then they missed some shots early in the 3rd quarter near the rim, but also I felt it was a lot of hero ball from Ant and Cat, to a lesser extent, to try and rescue them in that game, and that is not how this team needs to operate in those situations. That is the worst thing that can happen. And so having Mike Conley calm everybody down last night, that has to be the blueprint for them moving forward. It's like, okay, the other team just scored 3 straight buckets. Let's make sure we get a good possession, get a good shot. And I think I wouldn't trust Ant in that situation. I would trust Mike Conley to be the guy that helps them get that shot.
Right, because there's a difference between, like, you can still have Cat and Ant be your primary scorers in crunch time. There's a difference, though, between getting that in the flow of the offense or setting them up to be in a spot to succeed versus one of them going 1-on-2 or just dribbling it out and trying to hit this hero shot. That's maybe the difference that they have to learn. Like, you're still the man, you're still the guy, but you don't have to do it by yourself.
And we've heard Ant say the right things in that regard. And he even said similar things last night. Like, he's like, sometimes I just need to stop worrying about scoring so much, essentially. And he's not coming from a selfish place in that, I don't think. He's coming from a place of, I know if I score more, the team will do better. I think that's his, that's kind of his thinking. But I think the more that he sees that, like, yeah, Mike Conley can take this, or Kyle Anderson can take it, or Nas can help when he's coming in off the bench. He just has to, I think, just trust his teammates a little more and help set them up instead of trying to just set himself up. especially in those situations.
Yeah, and I think Chris Finch had a good quote after the game, the head coach, who we've talked about already, saying essentially like, hey, we want to see this some more. You used it in your game story. I'm finding it right now. Just talking about the maturity comes when you stack performances like this on top of each other. So that remains to be seen. But this was a great focused effort. So he's even kind of talking about, hey, you did it once. Can you do this again? Can you make this a habit?
Correct. And that is the question for this team. That is the ultimate question that this team has to answer. They have not earned the benefit of the doubt just because they beat Denver by 20 points last night. This team has shown that it can't be trusted these last couple of years. It can't be trusted to get satisfied with their own success. They can't be trusted within a game to hold a lead. It's like every game is a new adventure for this team. You never quite know what to expect with this group and what version is going to show up on a given night. So that is a huge step for them. They need to come out Saturday night. Utah, Utah's kind of in that zone of like they're tanking but not. Like they're the feisty tank team that's like still competitive, but ultimately as an organization is like not trying to win now. So
wouldn't be disappointed if they lost, right?
Right. But they, you still have to play hard to beat them. Like they just handed it to Memphis last night. So this is a team that you can't take light. This is, one of those teams that you can't take lightly. Utah came in here the second game of the season last year. I know there's different personnel now.
Yep, I remember that.
But they came in here twice last year and beat the Wolves at home at Target Center. And Mike Conley was a part of both of those games, by the way.
That's right. Yeah.
But this is a good test for them because this is a team that they cannot take lightly. And so following up a big win against Denver with a team you should beat, that you're at home, you have 2 days of rest, so no complaints there. Like you need to come out with a good performance Saturday night and show that, you're trying to build something here.
And I think maybe that was some of what raised the hackles of fans even through 3 games, was that a lot of the problems felt familiar, right? It was the late game offense. It was the inconsistency. It was some of the kind of clunkiness, the not being able to put a team away. So I get that. I also get that it was too early to be saying this is the same team, but I do get that to a certain degree. I also agree with you. And this team too missed Jaden McDaniels for the first 2 games of the year. Now, last time we talked, it was right on the eve of him signing that extension. And, you take a team that already looked pretty good defensively and add him to that mix. And he took a step. So, he's taken some offensive steps. He had a good offensive game against Denver. That changes their depth too. Like I think their depth is good, but you put Jaden McDaniels, you give kind of your full complement of players. The depth just looks different too.
It does. Because now you can have if Jaden's out there, you can have him and Nikhil kind of almost trade off as the perimeter defender guy, right?
Right.
So you can have 48 minutes of kind of above average to elite perimeter defender on the other team's best scorer. And that's not something that every team can trot out. You have, I think, Kyle Anderson as the 6th man is perfectly suited for that. Depth-wise, he can play with the starters in a pinch if needed. He can help organize the bench unit and kind of run the show with his playmaking ability at times. Him and, kind of Shake Milton kind of maybe trading off duties there. You've got Naz Reid, who's just playing fantastic basketball right now. Naz picked up where he left off before he got hurt last season. I thought, he's been he's been awesome.
Yeah, he has.
Some of those moves he had in that Denver game were just he's scoring here. He's got this guy posted up. He's going to do that little turn with the left hand, and it's going in. Every time Naz Reid does something, you have confidence that something good is going to happen as an end result of it. Nikhil is, like we said, very solid. Shake Milton, I think, still trying to find his way a little bit.
Yeah.
And find who he is within the structure of this team. That's kind of the one piece that's I think a little to be determined at this point, is just kind of how he finds his role. We'll see. I think he's got to find a balance between being aggressive, hunting for his shot, and trying to set people up. And I think they're trying to tell him to be more aggressive and try to score a little more. And you saw that a little bit in the Atlanta game, but you didn't really see it too much against Denver the other night.
I think what we have seen through 4 games is we see a pretty clear identity emerging, even if this is a team still trying to sort out some of its issues, right? Like they said they want to be a defense first team, and they are first in defense. Like that is what they are good at. They're playing slower this year. I think I think you said they're kind of down there in pace versus last season. Like it makes sense. They're a little bit more of a veteran, bigger team that wants to play good defense. This is different from some of the teams they had built, certainly different than the team they built 2 years ago before the Gobert trade, but they really didn't fully form that identity last year because Cat was hurt. You had D'Lo running the point, and D'Lo's not, D'Lo's going to push pace sometime. I know he's not, not the world's fastest player, but he's still going to kind of move the ball up and down the court to a certain degree, play pick and roll, quick games, things like that. Like having Conley and Gobert and Cat naturally means you're probably going to play a little bit slower.
Yes, it does. And I think that that suits this team. And I think the more the game slows down, the better it is for them, because you don't want to be getting up and down in transition against any teams with this lineup. B, they are maybe the best half court or one of the best half court defensive teams in the league. So anytime you're able to get a team to run stuff in the half court, that's a win for the Wolves and their ability to play defense. And to another extent along those lines, they're rebounding better this year. The rebounding numbers are very much improved through the first 4 games here. I think they were like 3rd or something like that in rebounding, defensive rebounding rate, where they were 26th a season ago.
And that was mystifying last year. Like, how can you be that with a big lineup? But they were
correct. But they were, and they've told us ad nauseum that it was not so much the big guys, it was the long rebounds and the guards and wings not rebounding. Jaden McDaniels had 9 rebounds last night. That's an important stat. There was a game where Ant had 14 rebounds, the opener against Toronto. Right. So as long as these guys who kind of Ant and Jaden specifically, if those guys are rebounding at a higher clip, huge significance for this defense. Nas, I think Chris Finch was talking about Nas's improved ability rebounding. I haven't really dug into his numbers yet on that end, but Chris Finch has never praised Nas's rebounding in the past, and he did the other night. So I think that's significant as well. So that's a big thing for me is the rebounding rate, because I feel like that just has killed them in the past. More than almost any other area. And so if they can keep up how they've rebounded the first 4 games, that's a great sign for them going forward.
Final thing for you, Chris. I mean, we talked about the 3 home games coming up, Utah and then Boston and then New Orleans. I mean, every game is important versus not, but we're watching kind of the accumulation over this season with having a pretty big impact on where this franchise might go beyond this year. We've talked multiple times about the contract situations they're up against. Jaden McDaniels' extension was for maybe a little bit more than I thought it was going to be, at least before the offseason started. Maybe that number became kind of more apparent that it was going to be more of like a $27 million a year kind of thing by the time it was all said and done. But that kind of puts them in a spot where they kind of know where they are financially. And like, how much do you think they're just evaluating this on a, not necessarily a game by game basis, but like, long view versus short view, and trying to figure out exactly what they have, before some of these hard decisions have to be made?
Good question. I think some things are emerging that'll help them in the long term view. If Naz Reid keeps playing like this, I don't know how he's not in your long term plans, even beyond the 2-3 with a player option deal that he's currently on. Like Naz Reid is, if he can keep this up for a full season, is cementing himself as a franchise player eventually here. The offensive fit with Carl and Rudy and Ant, how is that going to play itself out for the rest of the season here? Can they ever get it going? Will they ever get it going? And, what does that look like if you can't? What does that mean for the future, whether Carl and or Rudy are here after this season? Which one would you trade under that scenario? If you're trying to, if you're trying to win now, for instance, and the defense is your ticket, you're probably gonna want to keep Rudy. If you have the number one defense in the league like that, there's no reason to move on from him if the defense is going to function like it is early in the season right now. So I don't know what that's going to look like, and it's just game 4, so we have plenty of time to see how this is going to work itself out. But the defense being as good as it is, I think, is a very important sign for this franchise because you now have Jaden McDaniels signed up long term, and that is what he brings to the table. Like, you could always have an elite defense as long as you have somebody in the post that is a very good rim protector like that. It's a great combination to have defensively.
Yeah, I mean, like you said too, like if they've determined and decided, at least for this season, that defense is their identity, and if they are stated on record, as Tim Connolly is saying, every move from here on out is building around Ant, does kind of make you wonder, like, what this whole fit looks like. But maybe it all fits together great, and they don't have to do anything, and they're just gonna be a good team, and those side keep it together, keep it growing. But that's why they play the games, right, Chris?
That's right. We plenty of information still to come.
Yes, exactly. We will. I'm sure nobody will overreact to any of the small,
absolutely not,
sample sizes along the way.
Absolutely not. Every game, people have reasonable reactions and takes following every win and every loss.
Reasonable measured takes, looking solely at the long view. That is all that we do on this podcast and in Timberwolves Twitter. Chris Hine, appreciate it as always. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Mike.
I was kind of joking with Chris on Twitter Thursday night after the Wild game, saying, hey, look, it's not just Wolves Twitter that wants the coach fired. It's Wild Twitter, too. Whenever a game goes wrong, the coach gets the blame. So let's not just single out Wolves Twitter, Wolves commenters, things like that. It is everyone, if things are going south, that wants a coaching change. Let's finish with the cooler. We heard from Joshua Dobbs, new Vikings quarterback, on Thursday. I was not out there, but several of my colleagues were. And I thought the answer that he gave about, kind of how his background in education, he's an aerospace engineering major at Tennessee, obviously a very smart guy, how that helps you prepare for a football game. Sometimes I think, is it overblown when we talk about smart quarterbacks? We talk about, hey, Christian Ponder, smart quarterback. Does that translate to the field? Is there something to it? Is it just a completely different thing where, hey, yeah, it's maybe it's helpful in the classroom but doesn't translate to the field? I thought Dobbs had an interesting answer to kind of how that will help him, especially prepare on short notice to be ready for Sunday if he does in fact have to play.
Obviously, we're not out there doing engineering equations on the field, but the study habits, definitely, for sure. Like, I've had to cram for a lot of engineering tests because I procrastinated a little bit in college, so this is very similar to that, where you're cramming a lot of information, having to study it, but also, and not just study it just to memorize it, study it to actually go out and execute a plan. There's two different things. Like, I can tell you something and you can just spit it back to me, or like I can tell you and then you actually have to go act on that information that's been given. So those are two different ways of processing information. Obviously I have to do the second one at a really high level. So yeah, having to process a lot of information because of my trade in school definitely prepared me for situations like this. I want to say, any quarterback is always, preparing to learn an offense in a week to go out and play. But, I have been in these situations and have had to process a ton of information on a short amount of time. So it does prepare you for these situations.
And again, Jaron Hall is the starter this week. Dobbs is going to be the backup. Nick Mullins could come off of IR at some point, too. He's eligible to come off of IR in a week. It's going to be an interesting influx quarterback situation from week to week. Sounds like Dobbs is prepared for it. Sounds like Hall is prepared for it. He was impressive when he was talking earlier this week out at Vikings headquarters. Doesn't seem like he will be fazed by the moment, but again, he is a 5th-round rookie. Does he have the processing on the field? Does he have the physical skills to compete at this level? That's what we're going to find out on Sunday. But it is fascinating. It is a fascinating story to watch. We'll see who's quarterback from week to week. And, the Vikings haven't had to have that situation for quite some time. That'll do it for today. Lots of good stuff coming up next week. I imagine we'll talk about some Gopher women's basketball next week with that season starting. Vikings game, all sorts of stuff going on. So until then, enjoy your weekend. Back at it again on Monday.